3 weeks ago, a team of geophysicists pointed their equipment at the ground beneath the Great Sphinx of Giza, and what came back on the screen made them stop the survey entirely, not because they found nothing, because they found something they couldn't explain, a void, a cavity, a hollow space sitting roughly 15 meters below the paws of the Sphinx, with edges too straight and too regular to be a natural fracture in the limestone. And here's the detail nobody's talking about. Within 72 hours of that data going public, the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities issued a statement, restricted access to the survey zone, and announced that no further excavation is planned at this time. They found something beneath the Sphinx, they scanned it, and then they sealed it back up. Now imagine for a second, what if everything we've been told about who built the Sphinx and when and why, what if that whole timeline is wrong by thousands of years? Because that's exactly what this chamber is hinting at. I'm Dr. James Mercer. This just came in. Let's get into it. So here's the central mystery, and I want you to sit with it. Underneath one of the most studied monuments on Earth, a monument that's been surveyed, mapped, drilled, and photographed for over 100 years, there is apparently a sealed chamber that mainstream Egyptology insists shouldn't be there. And the moment the scans confirmed it, the site went quiet. Why would Egypt scan a chamber and then refuse to open it? What did those readouts actually show? Why does the orientation of this cavity line up with structures that supposedly predate the Sphinx by thousands of years? And why, every single time researchers get close to what's underneath Giza, does the funding disappear, the permits get pulled, and the experts suddenly stop talking? We're going to walk through all of it. The scans, the data, the suppression, and what it might mean. And look, if you're into discoveries that the institutions would rather you didn't think too hard about, do me a favor and subscribe right now. This channel breaks these stories down before the mainstream even touches them. You'll see them here first. Now let's go back to the beginning. The Great Sphinx sits on the Giza Plateau just outside Cairo. It's carved from a single ridge of natural limestone, one continuous block of bedrock. It's about 73 meters long, 20 meters high, and it faces directly east toward the rising sun on the equinox. Mainstream Egyptology gives you a clean story. The Sphinx was built around 2500 BC, during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. The face, they say, is Khafre's face. It was carved by the same labor force that built the second pyramid right behind it, case closed. That's what's in the textbooks. That's what the guides tell the tourists every day. But here's the thing the official tour leaves out. There is not one single inscription anywhere that names Khafre as the builder of the Sphinx. Not one. The connection is an inference, an assumption based on proximity. The Sphinx is near Khafre's pyramid, therefore Khafre made it. And underneath the Sphinx, the rumors of hidden chambers go back generations. The Egyptian archaeologist Selim Hassan, working in the 1930s, documented passages and cavities in the bedrock around the monument. Drilling in the 1970s by an American-Egyptian team picked up anomalies. Then in 1991, a geophysicist named Thomas Dobecki ran seismic surveys and detected what looked like rectangular voids beneath the paws and along the flanks of the Sphinx. Rectangular, not natural cracks, rectangular. And every time those investigations got close, they were shut down before anyone could open anything up. So when this new survey came back 3 weeks ago, showing the same kind of cavity with the same straight-edge geometry in roughly the same location, this wasn't a fluke. This was confirmation of something people have been chasing for almost a century. Now you might be asking, if people have suspected chambers under the Sphinx for decades, why hasn't anyone just dug them out? For centuries, people believed there was nothing down there worth finding. And for a long time, the technology wasn't good enough. You couldn't see through solid bedrock. All you could do was drill. And drilling into a priceless monument is the kind of thing that gets your career ended. But the problem ran deeper than technology. The problem was that the data didn't fit the timeline. And in archaeology, when data doesn't fit the accepted timeline, the data is what gets thrown out, not the timeline. Here's what I mean. In the early 1990s, a geologist named Robert Schoch a professor at Boston University, a credentialed scientist, not a fringe figure, examined the weathering patterns on the walls of the enclosure around the Sphinx. The Sphinx sits in a pit, a trench carved out of the bedrock, and the walls of that trench are deeply eroded. And Schoch said something that sent shock waves through Egyptology. He said the erosion patterns, the deep vertical channels were caused by rainfall, heavy, prolonged rainfall, water erosion, not wind and sand. Why does that matter? Because the Giza Plateau hasn't had that kind of sustained rainfall since the end of the last wet period in the region, which puts you back at least to around 7,000 BC, possibly earlier, thousands of years before Khafre. Thousands of years before the civilization that supposedly built it even existed. And when Schoch presented this, the reaction wasn't curiosity, it was hostility. He was dismissed, mocked at conferences, told he was a geologist meddling in archaeology. So you had a situation where the surface evidence already suggested the Sphinx might be far older than anyone admits, and you had seismic data suggesting hollow, possibly man-made chambers underneath it. And both of those threads pointed in a direction the establishment simply could not afford to follow. Nobody had the complete picture until the new scans. Then, 3 weeks ago, things started to change. A joint geophysical survey, and I want to be careful here because the official details have been kept deliberately vague, brought in a new generation of subsurface imaging. We're talking electrical resistivity tomography and ground-penetrating radar combined with muon detection methods, the same kind of technology that found the hidden void above the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid back in 2017. That 2017 discovery, by the way, was confirmed in the journal Nature. It was real. A 30-meter-long empty space inside the Great Pyramid that nobody knew was there. If they can find that inside solid stone, they can absolutely image what's underneath the Sphinx. And here's what the readout showed. A defined cavity, roughly 15 to 18 meters below the surface, sitting almost directly beneath the body of the Sphinx. The shape was the part that stopped everyone cold. The resistivity data outlined a space with sharp 90-degree corners, right angles, a floor that read as flat and level. But the real surprise came when they looked at what connected to it. Leading away from that primary cavity, the scans picked up a narrow linear feature, a passage, descending at a consistent angle, heading in a direction that takes it underneath and beyond the Sphinx enclosure itself. The void showed a density variation consistent with an empty air-filled space. Not collapsed rubble, not a water pocket, an open room, sealed, intact. Now think about what that means. An intact, sealed, air-filled chamber with right-angle corners and a connecting passage, 15 meters under the Sphinx. That is not a geological feature. Geology doesn't cut right angles. Geology doesn't build hallways. Somebody made that. And the story does not end there. As the team cross-referenced this new cavity against the older survey data, the Dobecki seismic work from '91, the Schoch enclosure mapping, something started to line up that nobody expected. The first revelation, the orientation, the connecting passage that descends away from the main chamber doesn't run in a random direction. It runs almost perfectly along a north-south axis, the same cardinal alignment that obsessed the builders of the entire Giza Plateau. Whoever cut that passage cared about the cardinal directions with the same precision as the people who aligned the Great Pyramid to true north within a fraction of a degree. The second revelation, depth consistency. This is the one that bothered the surveyors. The chamber sits at a depth that matches an old, almost forgotten reference. Back in the 1930s and 40s, there were reports, recorded by Egyptian authorities themselves, of a vertical shaft behind the Sphinx, sometimes called the water shaft, that descends in multiple levels deep into the bedrock. The lowest documented level of that shaft sits at a depth that lines up with the chamber the new scans just found. In other words, they may have found the room that shaft was always heading toward. But then they noticed something even stranger. The third revelation. The scans suggest the chamber isn't directly below the Sphinx's center of mass. It's offset slightly forward, toward the front paws. And that is exactly the spot where the so-called Hall of Records was predicted to be. Decades ago, long before any of this scanning technology existed, multiple independent sources claimed there was a sealed repository of records hidden beneath the front of the Sphinx. I'm not asking you to believe the prophecy. I'm asking you to explain the coincidence. Why does a chamber detected by 21st century resistivity imaging show up in the precise location that was named generations before the technology to find it existed? If this interpretation is correct, it would change the entire picture. What ties all these accounts together is that they don't come from one source, one team, or one era. They come from completely independent investigations separated by decades that keep landing on the same coordinates. Let's stack them up. Selim Hassan, 1930s Egyptian government archaeologist, documents tunnels and cavities in the Sphinx bedrock. Independent. The SRI International Survey, mid-1970s, an American team using resistivity and acoustic sounding, picks up anomalies near the paws and behind the rear of the monument. Independent. Thomas Dobecki, 1991, Seismic Refraction Survey, detects rectangular voids. Independent. Robert Schoch, same era, Geological Weathering Analysis, independently concludes the monument is thousands of years older than accepted. He's not even looking for chambers, and his conclusion still supports a lost advanced phase of construction. Independent. And now, 3 weeks ago, modern muon and resistivity imaging confirms a sealed, right-angled, air-filled chamber in the same zone. Independent. 5 separate efforts, 5 different decades, 5 different technologies, all converging on the same conclusion. There is engineered space under the Sphinx, and the monument above it may be far older than civilization is supposed to be. And here's the part modern science makes harder to dismiss: the water erosion. We now have climate reconstruction data, sediment cores, regional paleoclimate models that confirm the Giza region went through a dramatically wetter period thousands of years before the dynastic Egyptians. The rainfall, Schoch said, carved those enclosure walls. The climate data says that rainfall was real, and it ended around 5,000 to 7,000 years before the pharaohs. So the erosion isn't a fantasy. The chamber isn't a fantasy. The alignment isn't a fantasy. The only thing standing in the way of putting all of this together is a timeline that was written before any of this evidence existed and the people who refused to revise it. But here's what the critics don't address. If the chamber is just a natural void, if it's nothing, if it's a fracture, a water pocket, geological noise, then opening it costs nothing. You drill a small borehole, you drop a camera, you show the world an empty crack in the rock, and you embarrass everyone who got excited. Easy. So why seal it? Within days of the survey data circulating, access to the zone was restricted. The official line was that there were no plans for excavation at this time, no timeline, no follow-up survey announced, no camera probe scheduled, just closed. And this is not new behavior. This is the pattern. The 1991 Dobecki survey, the one that found the rectangular voids, the team's permit to continue was not renewed. Work stopped. In the late 1990s, there was an attempt to drill into the water shaft beneath the Sphinx and explore the lower chambers. It was filmed. And then, abruptly, the deeper exploration was halted, and the official explanation was that the lower level had flooded with groundwater. The flooding was real, but the exploration never resumed, and the footage of what was down there has never been fully released to the public. Researchers who pushed hardest on the older Sphinx theory found themselves frozen out. Conference invitations dried up. Permits got harder to obtain, and one by one, the people who knew the most went quiet. Retired, moved on, stopped giving interviews about the one subject they'd spent their careers chasing. Now you tell me, when you have a century of surveys all pointing at the same hidden space, and every single time someone gets close, the funding vanishes and the site goes dark, at what point does coincidence stop being a satisfying answer? The discovery wasn't just ignored, it was contained. This is where the biggest question arises, because if that chamber is what the data suggests, sealed, intact, deliberately built, sitting beneath a monument that may predate dynastic Egypt by thousands of years, then we are not looking at a side room in a tomb. We are looking at evidence of a civilization that existed before the civilization we credit with building it. a people advanced enough to carve a 73-meter monument from solid bedrock, align it to the cardinal directions, and cut a sealed chamber beneath it at a time when, according to every textbook, humans were supposed to be scattered hunter-gatherers with no writing, no engineering, no organized society. And if that's true, then the question stops being about the Sphinx at all. The question becomes, what happened to them? Who were they? And what did they think was so important that they sealed it in stone 15 meters underground and left it for us to find? Because someone built that room to keep something out, or to keep something in, or to keep something safe for a very, very long time. And right now, the only people who know what's behind that seal have made a decision. They've decided you're not supposed to see it. So now the question is this just an empty pocket in the limestone that someone got nervous about for no reason, or is the chamber under the Sphinx exactly what 100 years of suppressed surveys have been screaming about, and somebody somewhere has decided humanity isn't ready for the answer? I want to know what you think. Drop it in the comments. Do you believe that chamber stays sealed because there's nothing in it, or because there's everything in it? And make sure you're subscribed, because the moment new scan data leaks, and it will leak, I'm covering it here before anyone else does, because the last time a void like this showed up under Giza, what they found inside didn't match a single thing we were told to expect.